Welcome back to another Bazaar patch note review. I'm Inko, and this is for the hotfix going live 2 days after open beta launched, right before the weekend. And putting aside any complaints about pay to win, any analysis of the monetization, the fact that there's a quick and timely balance update is a good thing. I'll talk more about the monetization after the weekend when I've had more time to think on it and experience playing with it, but for now, let's just cover the patch notes. And the too long didn't read is, thank God, these are good patch notes, these are necessary balance changes. And I chose those words carefully. I did not say necessary nerfs, I said balance changes, because there are some buffs and just changes in here that I greatly appreciate as well. Let's get started on the Vanessa changes. The Darkwater Anglerfish no longer spawns at bronze tier, it starts at silver. Its cooldown is now 10, scaling down to 8 as it goes up to diamond, instead of a flat 7. It's now burn 10, which was its previous gold value at all tiers. And when you slow, charge this 2 seconds up from 1. This is, on the whole, a massive buff to the Anglerfish. At charge 1 second, it was basically unplayable previously. At charge 2 seconds, this could actually be a real card you build around, or at least just a good item to have on the board if you have relevant synergy for it. And skipping ahead to base set changes, it's not all new cards. The Pufferfish is now a direct mirror to this. The Pufferfish is the haste poison you all know, and the Anglerfish is now the slow burn equivalent, and they're both viable. Burn is better mechanically, but haste has something Vanessa has much greater access to. And yeah, this is much better. I think Pufferfish at bronze oftentimes just won day one fights on its own because it was so much poison. So I actually think this is a good change slash nerf to Pufferfish, and a very good and necessary buff and change to Anglerfish. Moving on to dive weights, they've gained the apparel type, makes sense. Its cooldown is up to 8 from 7, but we're not done with the nerfs yet. For each adjacent aquatic item, reduce this item's cooldown by 1 second. Previously, it was if both adjacent items are aquatic, reduce this item's cooldown by 50%. Dive weights were insanely fast, one of the best haste enablers for pretty much any board type, and the reason for that is because many weapon builds already ran a crow's nest, and you only need to find one more aquatic item to fit the dive weights between them and have permanent haste up time on everything. So this was really ubiquitous and good in a lot of different builds. It wasn't just an aquatic, it was by far the easiest in aquatic, but wherever it was going, it was a 3.5 second multicast haste generator. You do need some support, you need gunpowder or ammo skills, you need something to make it work. But even at baseline, it was pretty solid, and once you enabled it, it was absolutely crazy. Now with the way it works, the difference between 8, 7, and 6 is small enough that you can actually run it outside of specific board setups where it's mirrored on both sides by aquatic items. Also, the difference in 6, the minimum cooldown it currently has, and 3.5, the cooldown it used to have in those same circumstances, is pretty enormous. It's still one of the best, fastest haste generators in the game. It's still crazy if you stack ammo on it, but it is not as absolutely fucking busted as it was previously. It's probably just in a healthy spot right now, though I will say I tend to like more measured nerfs. I don't like seeing double nerfs ever. In this case, I'd have been fine with seeing this just only have the change at the bottom and knocking it up from 3.5 to 5. I think going all the way to 6 on the first nerf is like just a little bit too harsh. It's been almost doubled in cooldown, it's pretty rough. I do think it'll still be a good item, I just don't know that it's necessary to ever nerf this much in one go. Next up, the diving helmet gained the apparel type. Doesn't really matter, it should have it, but it's not a big deal. Primordial depth charge has been dominating the ladder. Previously, it scaled its cooldown from 10 to 9 to 8 as it went up in tiers. Now at every tier, it's just 2 seconds slower than it used to be. And that's a good nerf. It maintains the identity of the card, the thing the card's supposed to do, and it just doubles down on the weakness that it takes a long time to go off. In addition, by nerfing dive weights and making the haste go off later in the fight, that's sort of accomplishing the same thing in many builds. I think this is a good way to nerf Primordial Depth Charge, and it needed it, and I'll be interested in seeing how good it is now. It's probably still a very strong item. Next up, we have Submersible. It's been massively buffed, both in terms of general flexibility and raw power. Its cooldown has dropped from 8 seconds to 6 seconds, and now, instead of only having its cooldown if you have a vehicle, it has the cooldown if you have a vehicle or a large item. This makes the item tremendously more usable. Previously, when it was only vehicles, that resulted in a situation where there was no vehicle that wanted you to have a submersible on the same board as it. Now that large items count, you can use it alongside of a crow's nest, or perhaps some other large item. There's a lot more boards you might be able to use this on, and since it deals less than half the damage of a submarine for 2/3 the item slots, it compared very unfavorably. Now that it's actually a second faster than submarine, there's a real way to use this card. It's gone from like kind of unplayable abject garbage, where if you got the niche where it worked, it wasn't good, the rest of your board didn't want it there. Now it actually is good enough to see play when you have boards that enable it. specifically boards with large items that want good damage enablers. Because it's very fast. It's one of the fastest weapons in the game now at 3 seconds. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Submersible. It feels like it's actually playable now. Next up, we have the Yeti Crab. They fixed the bug with it. Not a big deal. Glad it's fixed. Hadn't seen it personally, but it sounds like a serious problem. More importantly, they changed its freeze scaling. It now always freezes any item for 1 second, no size restriction, down from freezing 1, 2, 3, or 4 small items based on tier. And that's massive because the other half of Yeti Crab that wasn't touched is poison scaling when items get frozen. So now the amount this scales has been massively cut at every tier above bronze. It's probably not really usable outside of like having an icy enchant on a poison item or specifically primordial depth charge in its current state. I think this is a fairly massive nerf, and previously I was able to make use of this just by having it at a decently high tier next to a poison item, but now I think I probably would never use this outside of like just throwing it onto a primordial depth charge like I said in my original card review. That wraps it up for Vanessa, so moving on to the Pig updates. The Aurora Dome got nerfed at Diamond, but now it's available at Silver, and it's the same at Gold as it used to be. And my notes on Pygmalien are going to be much more theoretical, because I haven't even unlocked these cards yet. No one who didn't spend 10,000 gems has played with any of this shit. But I will say that at Gold, this seems like a really niche effect that doesn't contribute to many win conditions, whereas at Silver, it can maybe hit a board temporarily, so this is the sort of item where being Gold plus only doesn't make a ton of sense, and this seems like a good buff, not actually a nerf. While it's worse at high tiers, it will actually see play at any tier now. Next up, we have the Cold Room nerf, and again, I haven't played with this yet. It seems like a complete menace. So while with the dive weights I said you shouldn't double nerf items, this one seems so far out of line that maybe it deserved it. It took a flat 2-second cooldown nerf, and in addition to that, it had the same tier penalty nerf we've seen before, where the lowest tier of an item's removed, and all the remaining tiers are essentially 1 tier behind what they used to be. It used to freeze 1, 2, 3, 4 items, now it freezes 1, 2, 3, and doesn't exist at bronze. Used to grant 3, 6, 9, 12 regen, now it grants 3, 6, 9, and doesn't exist at bronze. I have literally never personally seen a Cold Room on a board because I didn't spend 10,000 gems, and I didn't run into anyone who did either, apparently. But I hear that the thing was so monstrously overpowered that it deserved it. Next up, Ice Luge got changed. It now reduces the cooldown as part of its active instead of as a passive effect. And the reason this is necessary is you can get other items, namely the Cryo Sleeve, that freeze your own items and just reduce cooldowns all the way to 1 immediately. It's super fucked up. Ice Luge is still completely insane. Most runs you're not going to hit Cryo Sleeve. This is like a necessary change to prevent insane synergies. But the main thing that Ice Luge does was already broken and is still broken. Private Hot Springs got hit as well. The Omni Freeze at half health dropped from 4 seconds to 3 seconds, barely matters. What matters a lot is when you freeze, charge this 4 seconds down from 6. That is notably lower. Essentially, when you freeze, charge this halfway. It takes 2 freezes to trigger it as opposed to 1, and that is a necessary nerf. It's getting double hit, sort of, because Cold Room also got nerfed, and that's the main way to enable Private Hot Springs to self-charge. However, an item that full charges every time something happens with a ton of ways to trigger that something is probably too much. So again, while I typically say I don't want to see double nerfs, and synergy nerfs are nerfs, this probably deserved it, but I haven't seen it enough in practice to be sure of that. And lastly, at least for the new cards, the Steam Ladle got nerfed. It used to be burn 3, now it's burn 2. And now when you freeze, this gains 2, 4, 6, 8 burn, down from 3, 6, 9, 12. Frankly, at bronze, this item feels very confused. It's burn 2, which is called 3 damage. And when you freeze is an item of effect that starts at silver tier. So like Steam Ladle existing at bronze feels very weird. Not only do I not like this nerf, I don't even like that the item exists at bronze in the first place. Moving on to the base set, a lot of items got unbonked. Specifically for Pig, Bushel is back down to 4, Matchbox is back down to 4, and Weights are back down to 6. Frankly, I think Bushel was barely good at 4 previously. Moving it back down to 4 is good. Matchbox might not have needed the unnerf. It was one of the strongest things Pig could do. However, because Matchbox is based around other item speeds and everything else got bonked, I think it's probably fine. We'll have to see. Weights going back down to 6? Absolutely. Weights are not a good item. Buffing them is good. And Truffles had an enchantment issue fixed, which shouldn't be under Pig anymore. It's not a Pig item. For Dooley, the Uzi is unbonked as well, back to 2. Sadly, there is no note for the Katana. It's still at 3. I'd really like to see it get unbonked as well. And there's some miscellaneous notes here. Octopus is back down to 8. Just had to be for game integrity, you know? Snowflake is now only half a second to freeze as opposed to a full second to freeze. There was a bug with the Tzidian Dagger, that potion synergy item, where it didn't work at higher tiers. And lastly, a couple of skills got changed where when you poison or burn, gain regen for the fight that used to affect when your enemy does it as well. And now they're just about your build, and they aren't going to randomly counter match up and kill somebody because they dared to play a matchbox build against you and you had Heat Lover at Diamond for no reason. Probably just good for the game. I don't really like skills that are like, if your opponent does X, then do Y recursively, because that's just, it's a feels bad to lose to, and it's not even like a thing you can plan around and build around on your own end either. So I like that change. Even though it makes bad skills worse, I still like this change a lot. In summary, I really like this patch. Reworks on items like Anglerfish and Submersible are great. Nerfs on the crazy standouts like Dive Weight, Step Charge, Cold Room, and Hot Springs are great. Fixing almost bugged interactions, like clearly unintentional interactions like Ice Luge is great. Unbonking some of the items is great. These are the ones that got double dipped because every item that is bonked is also bonking Matchbox. I also expect to see a ton of notes like this Uzi nerf in the next couple of patches. There were just a ton of items that weren't very good and didn't need to be nerfed, that need to go back down a second or get buffed in some other way, and I'm expecting a lot of notes like this one. On the whole, it's a very good patch, and despite how dour I am about monetization, the fact that they are going out of their way to get a balanced patch out before the weekend during peak hours is a really good thing. I'll talk more about the monetization in a couple of days, and I won't be dwelling on it any further right now. For now, it's a good patch, I'm glad it happened, and I hope you enjoy the Bazaar this weekend. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.